On Tech News Today, Apple Watches are delayed because of a faulty part. Also, Secret is dead. And the FBI wants to read your email whether it's encrypted or not. It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Thursday, April 30th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Shutterstock.com. With over 52 million high-quality stock photos, illustrations, vectors, and video clips, Shutterstock helps you take your creative projects to the next level. For 20% off image subscription packages on your new account, go to Shutterstock.com and use the offer code TNT415. And by Braintree. If you're working on a mobile app and searching for a simple payment solution, check out Braintree. With one simple integration, you can offer your customers every way to pay. To learn more and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to BraintreePayments.com/TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. My name is Mike Elgan. Welcome to the show. Our co-anchor today is Ars Technica Senior Reviews Editor Lee Hutchinson. What's going on, Lee?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Not a lot going on here. It's a nice warm day in Houston, just hanging out.
Good old Houston. We were debating before the show began whether Houston was the air conditioning capital of the world, and I'm not sure if it is or not, but I think we established that it's not the ice hockey capital of the world.
No,
is that correct?
No, definitely not. We may actually have an ice hockey team. I think like the Houston Aeros or something. I don't know, but yeah, not really a sport you can follow all that well down here.
Ice melts in Houston very rapidly.
It tends to melt very, very rapidly.
All right, well, let's get into the news. Our top story today is that some Apple Watches have a faulty part which may be delaying shipments. The part enables one of the watch's most unique features, its ability to buzz and vibrate and tap the user and convey heartbeats and that sort of thing. The problem is with the Taptic engine components made by a Chinese supplier called AAC Technology Holdings, according to the Wall Street Journal. The flaw causes the Taptic part to break down over time, according to the report, and in response, Apple had to throw away a lot of watches, again, according to that same article in the Wall Street Journal. Now, the same part made by a second supplier called Nidec Corporation has been fine. Nidec is reportedly ramping up production to compensate for the losses from the other company. It's unclear whether Apple has shipped any defective watches to consumers. And just to be clear about that lack of clarity, some technology publications are reporting that it has delayed shipments, and others have basically called them out and said, where's your proof for that? As far as I know, as far as we know, there is no evidence that your Apple Watch is going to break down with its Taptic engine. Lee Hutchinson, are you an Apple Watch enthusiast? Are you either in possession of one or soon to be?
No, I actually didn't buy one. Several other people on staff did, but I was not one of them. And you're right, Mike. I mean, there's really no proof that this kind of component issue has led to a delay in shipping. We know that the shipping it seems like it's stretching out really, really far for new units sold. I think the developers who purchased them are being prioritized, but there's really no proof, right? There appears to be a causal relationship, but there's absolutely no proof. Although, Tim Cook's thing is supply chain management. That's his, real strength that he's brought into his position at Apple, and it kind of underpins everything that they do. And having a pair of suppliers for this component, this kind of demonstrates one of the things that Tim Cook is very, very good at, is having backups if stuff like this goes wrong.
That is absolutely true. And I had the same thought when I was looking at this. I'm like, they had two suppliers. That is a good move because they have one to fall back on. And of course, this is a brand new part. Apple has been lately getting into haptics very heavily. They're doing it with their touchpads in the new laptops, and they're doing it with the Apple Watch. And I've been really excited about the Taptic engine. I've been writing a lot about it. I love the concept. I think that it's the essential concept that I believe is that by integrating as many senses as possible into the watch experience for any wearable, actually, you essentially you kind of connect it into the nervous system, because your brain sort of expects the buzzes and sort of, when you see the sign, what's happening on screen based on what you touch with the sounds that it makes, and the taptics. You've got, all these senses being involved in simple little interface interactions, which over time sort of reprograms your brain to sort of expect these kind of things. I think we've all experienced phantom vibration syndrome from our phones. We feel our phone vibrating, and
yes,
we realize we don't have the phone on us, and so you sort of gives you the chills, and then you move on and go find your phone. But yeah, anyway. My point was that I'm really excited about this. And yesterday, Leo, who's been wearing an Apple Watch for a week now, burst my bubble. He's like, it's just a buzz. It's just like any other haptics, no big deal. So I'm still waiting for mine. I'm hoping to get mine within the next week or two, but hopefully I've got a functioning taptic engine that I can too also be disappointed in, as Leo is in his. Well, let's move to our...
You and Leo can tap back at each other. You can send little patterns back at each other on it.
That's what Leo said. He said he can send me his heartbeat.
That's so sweet. I'm sure you're really looking forward to that.
Yes, we're very close. All right, well, got some more news coming up. But first, let's talk about Shutterstock. This morning, when I was preparing the show, I also did some blogging. And of course, a lot of blogging lends itself to using pictures you've taken. For example, if I'm talking about something I did or saw or something I experienced personally, I'll take a picture of it and post it in my blog. But sometimes I blog about concepts. And if you look at my Google Plus stream, that's where I blog, you'll notice that a lot of the pictures that I have, the best pictures, let's be honest, are actually about the conceptual things that I'm blogging about. And I get those pictures always from Shutterstock. And, this morning I went in there looking for some way to talk about the future of management. There's a whole area of sort of automated management that's going on. And there were so many choices that I actually just, I had to use their sophisticated search algorithms to narrow down those choices because there were so many brilliant choices that I could have chosen from. And, you talk about the number, we talk about big numbers a lot on this show, 385,000. That's how many new images they add every single week to the existing 52 million high-quality stock photos and also illustrations, vectors, and video clips. Shutterstock is a blogger's best friend, but also if you have a website of any kind, a marketing site, a small business, a commercial, anything that you're doing, Shutterstock isn't going to help you out because they have high-quality photos. Now, you can use Shutterstock right away. No credit card is needed. Just start an account and start using Shutterstock, and you can start thinking about what your next project will be like. And you can even save your favorite images to a Lightbox to review later, and you can put in your credit card later when you decide to sign up and use it for real. If you do decide to purchase, make sure that you use the offer code TNT415 because new accounts will get 20% off image subscription packages. That's Shutterstock.com, and for 20% off image subscription packages on new accounts, use offer code TNT415. And we thank Shutterstock for their support of Tech News Today. Microsoft announced a range of products, services, and initiatives at its Build conference in San Francisco yesterday. Here to catch us up on what Microsoft announced is the Wall Street Journal's Nathan Olivarez-Giles. Welcome to you, Nathan.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great, thanks. Now, you pointed out that Microsoft can't stop calling everything it makes a platform. Is that because they're at a developer conference, or is that how Microsoft sees itself now as a platform company?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, that's definitely the buzzword. Everybody's saying platform, whether it means anything or not. But with Microsoft, it actually does reflect who they think they are. They're really trying hard to connect all of the different pieces they have. They have Azure to build and deploy apps on. They have Windows running across all these different devices, phones, tablets, computers, augmented reality headsets, the Xbox. And then, they have their software, they have Office, and they're really trying to even turn Office into a platform so it can plug into different apps and stuff like that. So they really want to sell developers on the idea that, hey, we have all of our, act together, we're moving forward, we're doing cutting edge stuff, and now's the time to buy in and build what you're making on our platforms, right? So, and they even took some steps to actually make it so that if you're building apps for Android or iOS, they want you to build in Microsoft environments and then port stuff over. Or if you're building for those other environments, you can actually bring things over to the Windows operating system. So they made a lot of changes, but platform, it's a silly buzzword, but Microsoft genuinely means that, yeah, we're trying to get everything together on the same page here.
Nathan, let me ask kind of a philosophical question here. Do you think that this is what we're seeing now is a really good indication of of Satya Nadella's Microsoft? Do you think this is what this is what he wants for the company going forward, this sort of unified vision of one Windows and everything? Or do you think a lot of this is still kind of Ballmer era stuff that's just now bubbling up to public release and completion?
Well, I think the ideas really started before he got there. If you look at what Ballmer did before Satya Nadella took over as CEO, they started combining divisions. They started kind of mainstreaming a lot of stuff, bringing Xbox kind of into the fold more so. But I think, Satya was on board with that idea from the get-go. And I think one of the reasons why they chose him is because they thought he would be the right guy to kind of push this idea forward. So I think very much the way that they're combining things is a reflection of Satya Nadella, is a reflection of kind of his ethos of being inclusive, of, not just trying to bring people to Microsoft, but saying, hey, you know what? Android and iOS have the apps. We need to go where they're at. So we need to make it really easy for people who are already, working over there to bring their stuff to Windows. They yesterday released a new Visual Studio app for Mac computers. In the past,
exciting.
It is actually exciting if you're a developer. If you were before developing, you would have to use a virtual machine, and that's kind of just a pain in the butt. Now, there's an entire generation of developers who grew up loving Macs and kind of hating Internet Explorer and not really thinking Microsoft was that cool. Now they're saying, hey, listen, we have a great cloud services ecosystem. We can come to you. We're making the products wherever you're at. So they're not just kind of building for themselves. So yeah, Satya's taken this idea forward. I think this is really a reflection of what he thinks is best for the company. But, some of these ideas did start with Ballmer for sure.
Joe Belfiore plugged a monitor and keyboard into a phone and used it just like it was a regular PC. What do we learn about this? Are we all going to be able to do this with our Windows 10 phones?
You know what? That was actually a really exciting moment. So Microsoft is calling this Continuum, and basically in the future, they didn't say when, but sometime in part of Windows 10, and what they kind of said was Windows 10 will be around for about 2 to 3 years. We'll be able to buy specific Windows 10 phones, plug them into a monitor, and run them as a PC. He used a keyboard and mouse and actually, checked some email, messed around in PowerPoint. That's a pretty exciting idea. It's kind of been almost like a holy grail idea of, okay, I don't need a bunch of computers. How about one little device I can just plug into different screens to get the different experience that I want? I really, really like the idea. I think it's a great step forward. It feels kind of cutting edge. My question really is, with so much of our stuff happening in the cloud, almost why do we need a computer? Why do we need, one device to carry around? Maybe someday, hopefully, this stuff will be small enough and portable enough that it's just like essentially kind of all in the cloud, and the heavy computing is happening up there rather than on a device, right? So it's a really great idea. We'll see what the timing looks like, but there's a ton of potential there for sure.
You mentioned their cloud stuff too. They made a number of cloud-related announcements too. It almost sounded like they're taking on EC2 and the database stuff that Amazon is doing. Is that, you think, significant and interesting, or do you think it's just Microsoft trying to add additional value to their, I know we're not supposed to say platform, but to their platform?
Yeah, I think it is significant and interesting. The reason being is that if you look at the core of Microsoft's customers, they still have a lot of those business customers. They're still in the enterprise in a huge, huge, huge way. Now, PC sales have been declining and Mac sales have been rising, but really in the enterprise and businesses in most of the world, people are using PCs. So a lot of folks going to Amazon Web Services, a lot of folks going to Google or Salesforce for database stuff, and basically Microsoft has a competent offering against that in Azure and even other development tools like SharePoint and different kind of cloud-based ideas. So I think it is significant. They need to retain those customers. They need to win back consumers, regular people like you and me, but they need to maintain those business customers too. So all of those cloud announcements are really kind of centered around that. Like, how do we bring in new people without losing what we have in the first place?
Microsoft announced the easy porting of Android and iOS apps to Windows 10. How are developers receiving this news? Is there any excitement behind this idea?
It really seems like there's a lot of excitement. It really does seem like there's a lot of excitement. They did some demos on stage of porting over some apps, and it looked fairly easy. I have a ton of questions about this because there have been a lot of different products over the years that have claimed to do this exact same thing, and it never quite works that well. It never quite works that easy. Recompiling apps, emulation, things like this don't always seem to work 100%. if Microsoft can actually figure this out, if they can crack this open, that could be pretty massive in and of itself. But the question still remains, why would a developer want to port their apps from Android and iOS over to Windows Phone if Windows Phone doesn't have a significant amount of users? Now, part of it is ideally, if it runs on Windows Phone, it should be able to run on Windows 10, but that still brings in the issues of building an app that is, essentially responsive and kind of scalable in that way. Because right now, smartphone apps just still don't look that good on computer screens, on laptop screens, on desktop screens, or even tablet screens for that matter. So, there's a lot of questions as to, are developers going to take the time to put the effort into a place that doesn't have a lot of users, that just doesn't have a lot of consumers using it? Windows Phone is just not popular. Android and iOS are really killing it. So, it's great that Microsoft is saying developers will do it. Will developers actually do it remains to be seen. But from a technological standpoint, it could be super, super exciting if they actually figure this out.
So Microsoft says 1 billion Windows devices running Windows 10 in 3 years. What does that mean? What does 1 billion devices mean in this context? Because I mean, it's not just talking about 1 billion desktops or 1 billion phones or whatever. This is like spread across a whole bunch of different things, including like Raspberry Pis and all kinds of little bitty niche things, right?
Yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved it when Meyerson, Microsoft's Windows chief, basically said, we're going to have 1 billion devices running Windows 10 in 2 to 3 years, because it just felt so ambitious and almost like overly confident, and like it just didn't really quite make a ton of sense either. Basically, there are existing Windows 8 computers that should be able to run Windows 10. And then there's all the Windows phones and Windows tablets that are out there. And then there's the Xbox. And then there's, the HoloLens headset that will eventually come. And then there are all the new PCs and phones and tablets that they hope to sell, right? So hitting 1 billion devices, it sounds really, really great. And if you're sitting in that seat and you're a developer and they're trying to sell you, it's like, okay, yeah, I want to reach 1 billion people. That's more than Android. That's more than anyone else, right? That's exciting. But will they actually be able to do it? I honestly have no idea. If anything, at this point, I think very little confidence that they're going to pull it off. The reason being, Windows 8 only hit about 200 million licenses the last time they gave us sales numbers, which was February 2014. Windows 7 only hit about 240 million licenses. Now, if you add in Xboxes in there, if you add in phones and tablets, I don't know if that still gets you to 1 billion. So it's a pretty ambitious plan. But at a developer conference, you need to be ambitious. You need to be confident. You need to show everybody in the room that, hey, we got this. We're going to make it happen. Buy into our vision. Get on board. But it really just sounds like a pie in the sky idea. It made me laugh a little bit, to be honest.
Nathan, Microsoft blew everybody's minds again with the HoloLens demo, which included this time apps for the first time. What was that demo like? And also, you mentioned that you used the word eventually with HoloLens. I remember when Microsoft first rolled out HoloLens, they said that it would come within the time frame of Windows 10. And a consensus quickly formed around that phrase to mean that it would ship when Windows 10 ships. But I interpreted that as meaning that sometime between when Windows 10 ships and Windows 11 ships, it's going to land sometime in there. But it's looking like that latter interpretation is correct, isn't it? So if you can comment on just what the experience of that demo was like, and also what you think about the timing of HoloLens.
Yeah, well, let's start with what the experience is like. It looks really, really, really cool. It looks like the coolest version of augmented reality that I've seen thus far, right? It's not quite virtual reality. It's not taking over your entire field of vision, but it is placing, computer-generated images in front of you, and they follow you around. They're to scale. They're really, really slick, and they look very, very high fidelity. Now, they showed off a really neat demo of an application where like medical students and their professors could actually look at like a life-size human body. They could kind of dissect it. They could pull out the heart and look at it in real size, and then even blow it up to see minute details that you might otherwise miss. They could walk around a globe. There was like a digital puppy. And there was a neat little actual physical robot. It looked like it was an erector set that had like an augmented reality projection above it. It's really, really, really cool. There are some kind of issues that I have as far as like looking at it on kind of along the edges. There looks almost to be like a little line of bleeding light. That is something that you kind of see in virtual reality headsets. And it's almost as though the display can't necessarily quite process, what's in front of you versus the light panels behind it and things like this. But it's really, really neat. And especially for a Generation 1 product, it looks fantastic. So the hype is there. I can't wait to try it out for myself. I haven't gotten to try it out for myself yet. But the potential for using this for educational purposes or even entertainment purposes really seems awesome. The headset does look a little heavy. I don't know how long people would actually want to wear it. But the fellow on stage who was wearing it, well, all the people, they were just walking around like normal as though they could see through it. So I don't think you'll see people walking down the sidewalk wearing these things, but it sounds like if you wanted to, you could, which is kind of a crazy idea. One of the really neat things is that it doesn't need to be connected to a phone or computer. It can run on its own, which I think is really, really cool and makes sense since a lot of people don't have Windows phones and they want to reach everybody, right? Not just people who have existing Windows products. So that's pretty cool. That could be kind of a toehold into some new consumers. As far as when it's going to come, Microsoft is basically saying that Windows 10 is going to arrive sometime this summer. And that's pretty vague. We don't exactly know when. And then as far as the time frame thing, what people at Microsoft have told me is that HoloLens, a consumer version of HoloLens, is going to come before the end of the year. That seems super, super ambitious. We haven't been told how much it's going to cost. Now that's already been out there reported. I didn't just break any news or anything like that, although I wish I did. But that is the kind of promise and potential. That's pretty early. And if it's delayed, I wouldn't be surprised because cutting edge stuff like this gets delayed sometimes. The Apple Watch was delayed. Google Glass has been delayed into perpetuity almost. And HoloLens is really, really cool and it's super cutting edge. And it's a kind of a reminder that there are some really neat ideas happening at Microsoft and they're not just all about Windows and Office, right? But, how much will it cost? We have no idea. When's it actually going to ship? That's really just kind of a vague thing right now too. They're still trying to figure that out. I
got to tell you, some of these medical applications would freak me out. I don't want like skeletons walking around and like giant hearts like beating in the middle of the room. Kind of gruesome, but still very, very cool. Nathan Olivarez-Giles is at WSJ.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at NateOG. Thanks for joining us today, Nathan.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, I'm happy to announce that the anonymous message app secret is dead. Miguel Helft is the San Francisco bureau chief for Forbes and joins us to talk about the untimely demise of this anonymous app. Welcome to you.
Thanks very much for having me.
Now, didn't Secret have money in the bank? Why did they shut the service down?
Well, it's not clear. We heard about the shutdown through blog posts that one of the co-founding that the app was no longer living up to whatever the mission or the spirit of what he intended to do. And because of that, he had decided to gracefully wind down the company over the next couple of weeks and return whatever was left of the money. We don't know how much is left to investors. And some investors thought that was a very noble thing. The thing that doesn't quite sit with me is that the two founders here took $6 million off the table last year when they were raising money. And before they had proven anything about what this app and this company was going to do, it got a lot of buzz last year, but obviously that buzz fizzled.
So, Miguel, as a journalist, I want to ask: does an app like Secret have any kind of inherent value to you? Like, is this something that, when dealing with sources who may need to report in information anonymously and sensitive stuff, is this kind of app something that represents value to journalists, or is this not really disruptive enough, or it's too new, or doesn't do enough, or what?
I think it's sort of potentially could have some value as you want sources to be able to talk freely and anonymously, but the caveat with that is then you don't know who the source is. And, I played around with the app last year. A lot of it was very sophomoric. There was like who's sleeping with who. It was very tech industry focused. and then some stories were broken on Secret because, some employee at some company could, put something out, say, hey, my CEO is leaving or something like that. But you had no way of gauging who the source is. So as a sort of legitimate journalist, it's a little dicey to think you're going to use this to break stories. I would prefer to confirm things and with a second source before I rely on that.
Now, it seems to me that this thing apparently got away from the original vision. And it seems to me that anonymous messaging apps are inherently problematic because, as you mentioned, when this thing first hit, it was all people within Silicon Valley and the tech industry talking to each other, and also the tech journalists who cover that industry. It was all very incestuous, but also pretty relevant because, you know, it was an insiders talking to each other. But as it grew, it became increasingly valuable to spammers and haters and trolls and others. And isn't that going to happen anytime you have anonymous messaging?
I think that's true. I mean, that there are serious problems with Yik Yak, which is one of the competitors. Whisper seems to be doing okay, but you know, eventually all these, you know, you have an anonymous bulletin board. Anybody's going to say anything, it's going to attract the bottom of the barrel. And so even if there's something interesting there, it's going to be hard to you know, separate what's interesting and legitimate from just the trolling and the, you know, ludicrous stuff. I mean, what's interesting, this investors, we live in an age where investors are far less worried about blowing 10 or 20 million on something that, like Secret, folds a year later than missing the next Instagram or the next WhatsApp. So they threw 35 million, you know, big name investors like Kleiner Perkins and Index Ventures. They threw 35 million at this company, and you know, it's gone.
Wow. What a story, and nobody was expecting it. That was quite a shocker yesterday. Well, Miguel Helft is at Forbes.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at MHELFT. Thanks for joining us today, Miguel.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the FBI and the NSA have been criticizing tech companies for building better encryption into their products. They say they want to be able to gain access to encrypted communications to fight crime and protect Americans from terrorists. Joshua Kopstein is a privacy researcher and columnist at Al Jazeera and joins us now. Welcome to you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, you wrote that the government's crypto panic is powered by fear, not facts. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so this is actually a really old debate that's been being had since like the 90s, and basically every time these sort of encryption apps or encryption starts becoming more prevalent, the FBI and the NSA and all of these different three-letter agencies start coming out and saying that basically, like, we're going to fall into digital anarchy. We're going to have complete chaos if we don't find a way for the government to access communications in a way where they can just sort of go in and get access to anyone's communications at any time. And this is like, you know, the story is like the four horsemen of what we call the four horsemen of the infopocalypse, which is terrorists, kidnappers, pedophiles, drug. I forget who exactly are the four horsemen of the infopocalypse, because they change a lot. But generally speaking, they're trying to say that, you know, there's going to be communications which will therefore, as a result, be completely inaccessible to law enforcement agencies as a result. And okay, so there's like a lot of things wrong with this idea. I guess the first one is that it's not true. They're pitching some kind of like dystopian fantasy where, you know, criminals can use encryption to just completely shield themselves from the law. But, you know, what we've been seeing over the past year plus is that, you know, according to the Snowden documents and like various other things, we've seen clearly that, you know, we're living into what the NSA itself describes as a golden age of surveillance. Feds have like countless ways of obtaining encrypted communications. Sometimes they just do it by getting a court order, you know, just by compelling you to hand over your passwords or encryption keys. And then other times they do it through more sort of like novel means, through hacking and like, you know, use like sending malware to your computer. And that's something that we're seeing a lot more of as time goes on, is that the number of ways that law enforcement agencies can get access to your data is actually expanding. And so when they say that they're going dark, what we're actually saying is that they're going bright.
Well, Joshua, I mean, in your opinion, given the civil and criminal remedies that exist for the three-letter agencies like today, this is a difficult question to answer. I know it's kind of philosophical, but is the ability to, you know, instantly, like the legal ability to instantly decrypt any encrypted message, is that even something that needs to be in law enforcement's toolkit, given everything else that they can do when pursuing an investigation or when tailing, when tailing criminals or whatever?
No, it's really not, and the reason why, and it's actually pretty obvious based on the FBI's and the, you know, these various agencies' own actions. For example, just a couple of weeks ago, one of our reporters, of a guy I know at Motherboard, which is Vice's technology site, reported that the DEA is actually buying hacking software from a company called Hacking Team, which is based in Italy. And they're buying it through a shell company in Maryland, trying to hide the fact that they're actually doing business with this company. And so this hacking tool is called Remote Control System. And this is, I have a quote here of how they advertise it. It says, "You cannot stop your targets from moving. How can you keep chasing them? What you need is a way to bypass encryption, collect relevant data out of any device, and keep monitoring your targets wherever they are, even outside of your monitoring domain. Remote Control System does exactly that," end quote. So what we see here is obviously that all of these agencies have a huge number of ways of getting data. And, you could also possibly chalk that up to the fact that, this company really wants to sell some products to some law enforcement agencies. But the fact that we're seeing this more and more prevalently, like this particular tool, researchers have found being used by governments to go after journalists and activists in Morocco, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, various places around the world where human rights records are deplorable. So, the fact that, we have the United States government also interested in these tools, and, it's not just them buying tools. The FBI has been making its own hacking tools for at least a decade. It started with the Magic Lantern malware kit, which made rounds, I think, back in 2001. Carnivore, which was a huge program that the FBI had for hacking into computers. And so, on some level, a lot of this makes sense because, when you're dealing with encryption is really just really complicated math. And everybody knows that the easiest way to, do well on a math test is to just steal the answers. And so that's what they're doing by using these hacking tools to get inside of people's computers and steal their encryption keys. It's the easiest way for you to decrypt these communications. And so, yeah, we are seeing more and more law enforcement using these tactics, and it really sort of it just completely invalidates this argument that criminals will become completely inaccessible. And another example, of course, being, the Silk Road case. The Silk Road case was, as you know, was a huge online drug bazaar that was shut down by the FBI, not because they found some kind of vulnerability in Tor, which is the anonymity software that, allowed the Silk Road to exist, or Bitcoin, the digital currency, but because the guy who ran it eventually screwed up and they followed his tracks through doing, just regular sort of traditional detective work. And I think that as we go on, we're going to see more and more of these kind of, online crimes being solved through those methods, and maybe also through, hacking methods, although we have to also have a discussion about that. But, the idea that all these communications are going to become completely inaccessible is just completely wrong.
What's the old saying? Perfect OPSEC is hard. It really is.
It really is, yeah. It's, 90%, I think, of these cases are just people just making mistakes. And it's because it's really easy to get somebody to start using Tor or start using, PGP encrypted email. They eventually learn how to use that. But, it's a mindset. So, you can't do that consistently, constantly. And eventually somewhere along the line, somebody screws up. So, that's just part of the proof as to why this is not a real problem. This is the FBI just sort of scaremongering and trying to scare everyone into sort of doubling down on their surveillance powers. And interestingly, on the hacking point, the FBI actually used to advertise on their own website that you use encryption to protect your data from criminals, and they recently removed that part from their website. So even the FBI admits, and it's funny because at this hearing that was yesterday, where they discussed this before Congress, it was a panel of expert witnesses. Then there was a congressman who asked the entire panel, which included the executive director of the FBI, assistant executive director of the FBI, Amy Hess.
I believe this is Will Hurd, Representative Will Hurd, who you're talking about, I think, right?
Yeah, no. So Will Hurd was managing it, but I believe the person who asked was Blake Farenthold, who's a Republican from Texas. And so he asked the entire panel. So essentially, what the FBI keeps asking for here is that we need backdoors into all these products. And the way that these companies keep responding, which is true, is that you can't build backdoors into products without introducing vulnerabilities that can be exploited by everyone. So if you're giving a backdoor to the FBI, you're giving a backdoor to the Chinese government, to the Russian government, to Russian cyber criminals. It's stupid to suggest that you can open up a vulnerability in a piece of software and not also give access, potentially give access to other third-party actors. And so this Blake Farenthold asks the entire panel, including the FBI witness, do you think it's possible to implement crypto backdoors without lessening the security of people who use these tools? Not a single person raised their hand, including the FBI and including the DA, who I believe was a DA of Massachusetts. This guy named I forget his name, but yeah. So yeah, it just goes to show that like even the FBI doesn't seem to be so incredibly, forceful on this issue. Like they seem to almost like kind of subconsciously acknowledge that their entire premise is just completely ridiculous.
I'm sure that individuals within that organization are divided on the question. That has got to be the case. And I, for one, want, law enforcement to nab criminals, and I want the NSA to prevent terrorist attacks. But I also want no part of the U.S. government or any government to have basically no oversight, which essentially they're acting, what they really want, it's not about access, it's about getting direct, unmonitored access. That's why we have the court system. They need to go to the courts to get permission to do any sort of surveillance or, sort of to read any potential criminals' emails or whatever. That's the system that works, and every time there's new technology, the powers that be always try to nab more power by saying that what the electronic version of what we used to do is different. So we need to change the balance of power, and that, in my opinion, is wrong. Joshua Kopstein is at aljazeera.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at ZenAlbatross. Thank you so much for joining us, Joshua.
Thanks.
Well, Apple, IBM, and Japan Post announced a partnership yesterday to help Japanese senior citizens take care of themselves using Apple iPads. The project has IBM-created apps that integrate with Japan Post services. Apple's role apparently is to collect money from the sale of iPads. And actually, the apps integrate with FaceTime and other apps. The initiative will enable seniors to manage household maintenance, medical services, and caregiving. Nearly a quarter of Japan's population is over 65, and they're expecting that number to rise to 40% in the years ahead. One of the interesting things about Japan, Lee, is that they are so obsessed with this question of their aging population. They don't have big immigration like a lot of European countries in the U.S. and Canada and other countries have. And so what's happening is as their population ages, they keep coming up with technology solutions, oftentimes involving caregiving robots, and in this case, iPads. Do you think this is something that will serve as a model for the future? Because, of course, aging populations are here to stay globally, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, aging population is going to be a huge issue. It already is a huge issue, but it's only going to get like more and more of a huge issue as time goes on here, especially as the boomers sort of age out and begin to like really stress the retirement and healthcare systems. I think this is a uniquely Japanese way of approaching this kind of thing, though, and I like it. I remember there was some question, I mean, as we got into the 2007, 8, and 9 period prior to the iPad being introduced, but after the iPhone was introduced, about what the acceptance of Apple gadgets would be in Japanese gadget culture, which is very, there's like the cell phone has played for decades, a huge role in Japanese gadget culture. And it was always kind of a question of like, is Apple really going to be able to break in here? Because at the time, the iPhone didn't offer nearly as many of the features as a common Japanese cell phone would. And now clearly, like as with the iPad doing this kind of thing, you can't go to any Japanese electronics store without seeing Apple products these days. So it's interesting the infusion of Apple into that culture and how it's sort of like come into all of these different roles, including the elder care thing, which is fascinating.
It sure is. Well, in follow-up news, we told you a week ago that U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter would unveil a new cyber strategy for the Pentagon. He did that last Thursday. The new policy calls for retaliatory attacks by the Pentagon when the U.S. government and even U.S. businesses are attacked by state-sponsored hackers. Today, China's defense ministry expressed concern about the strategy, saying that it would increase international tension. They said, quote, "This will further exacerbate contradictions and up the ante on the internet arms race. We are concerned and worried about this," unquote. In other words, China's concerned that there could actually now be a cost associated with stealing American technology and trade secrets. Lee, do you have any thoughts on this? What do you think of the new Pentagon policy?
Honestly, whenever I hear legislatures or our war fighters who typically do a very good job fighting conventional wars beginning to talk about things like cybersecurity or really anything that involves prefacing a thing with the word cyber, it just really makes me nervous because it feels like these guys watched like one movie in 1994, got all of their impressions on what the internet is from that, and continue to carry that through at all levels of government. It just, I don't know how to fight a war, but you wouldn't put me in charge of the Department of Defense. Similarly, a lot of these lawmakers who are in charge of these things, I think, have absolutely no concept of what the internet is and how hacking works, and how finger quotes hacking in real life is so much different. It's not like watching Swordfish and doing all the stuff they do in that movie, or watching Hackers with Matthew Lillard and all those guys. It's just, the disconnect scares me. So if China's worried about anything, China's probably worried about like what new idiot laws are we going to pass and screw up the internet.
I do think that the United States as a country and the United States government as an entity, as an organization, is essentially better at offense than defense, because there's so many leaks, so many, you can't keep secrets in the U.S. government. There's so many ways in, I guess, is the way to say it. But the U.S. is really good at the attack strategy, and I think that's essentially what the conclusion they've come to, which is that, look, we're never going to button this thing up to the point where nobody can hack us. We're certainly not going to do that in the private sector. The biggest advantage I think the U.S. government has is antiquated technology. Nobody remembers how to hack these things anymore. But they're really good at the sort of Stuxnet type of attacks, and so I think that's what they're trying to leverage. But we'll see how this plays. And of course, China has its own vulnerabilities, and they hate it when. And I love the wording of this too, because they're basically saying, we don't want to be attacked when we hack you, but we haven't hacked you. We never hack you. That sort of thing. They're basically saying this will further exacerbate contradictions. That is communist BS. I mean, this is the kind of doublespeak that you always see from Communist Party type of countries. What do you mean exacerbate contradictions?
That really doesn't mean anything. Honestly, that's just words.
Yeah. So anyway, so the contradiction is that they do a lot of hacking and then they claim that they don't. That's a contradiction, and that's going to be exacerbated here. All right, well, Amazon has acquired a company called ClusterK. The startup runs apps on AWS at 10% of the normal price. A VentureBeat source says the startup's technology will be integrated in Amazon's EC2 Spot instances, which is Amazon's system for bidding on EC2 compute capacity. The terms were not disclosed. Amazon's going to try to make it cheaper, and they're going to use technology to do it. Lee, I think this is a great move on their part.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at what goes into providing, software as a service, this kind of thing, and there's a substantial capital investment, right? I mean, that's why as a customer, you get involved with cloud computing, is to offset that initial CapEx. And, Amazon as the provider eats that CapEx. They have to build the infrastructure, which they then sell. And anytime they can monetize kind of idle capital, like computers that aren't necessarily doing anything, it's a win for them. And that's what Spot instances do in the first place. So yeah, I mean, even if they're selling off excess Spot time to this ClusterK company, which I guess they've now acquired anyway, they still come out ahead, because otherwise they wouldn't be drawing in any capital for the use of that equipment at all. It'd just be sitting there sucking down electricity.
And to answer a question in the chat room, no, iBookery, ClusterK is not a breakfast cereal. Well, we got some more news for you in just a sec, but first let's talk about Braintree, our other sponsor today. What is Braintree? Braintree is a full-stack payments platform that makes it easy to accept payments if you are a developer. If you're a mobile app developer, you've got to check out Braintree. They're really going to save you a lot of trouble and make it much, much easier for your customers to pay you. Braintree is used by companies like Airbnb, Living Social, Uber, Hotel Tonight, Munchery, and many, many other sites where the payment process is conspicuously easy to do. They have sophisticated fraud protection for merchants of every size, and you know what? It comes at no additional cost. They have great customer service, and their integration is famously super simple. It just takes a few minutes to integrate Braintree into your app or website. Continuous support, fast payouts, and they'll help you with mobile cart abandonment, which is a big problem. People start to buy something and then they wander away. Braintree will help you keep those people who wanted to buy something from you and make it possible for them to actually go through with their purchase. Braintree gives you a full stack payment solution and support for all payment types: PayPal, Apple Pay, Bitcoin, Venmo, credit cards, and more, all with a simple integration across all platforms. They also have superior fraud protection, superior customer service, and fast payouts. To learn more and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to braintreepayments.com/TNT. Well, in our human resources department, Apple is reportedly poaching talent from the BBC for its upcoming streaming music service. The best-known hire is BBC Radio 1 presenter Zane Lowe. Some reports say that Lowe is aggressively contacting music artists on Apple's behalf to convince them to create custom radio stations for the Apple service. The company's also snapped up 4 BBC producers. Lee Hutchinson, I don't think that the BBC is the best place to poach music. I've tried to listen to BBC music, and their taste in music, in my opinion, is always really weird.
Well, you know, it's probably because you're not British.
It could be, but neither is the rest of the world outside of Britain.
Apple's got has always demonstrated really good taste in acquisitions. I mean, you know, very once in a while they'll hire somebody like
Dr. Dre.
No, I was going to say the guy who they poached away from Tesco's to run the Apple stores for a little while that blew up in their faces. But generally, they bring on good talent for a reason. You know, Beats notwithstanding. So I can only assume that they've got something in mind here that they really want to do that they think they're going to be successful at.
Yeah, I'm sure they know what they're doing. You know, what's interesting is that they've already got this Zane Lowe character working hard for the end result, which is clearly going to be.
You know, Mike, if it doesn't happen, they've got $187 bajillion in cash sitting around. They can just sort of write it off and be like, didn't work.
And they've already got your credit card. So if push comes to shove, they just take some money. All right, well, our TNT fan of the day is Kalle Rainio in Finland, who posted this picture on Twitter. There it is. Look at it. It's a sort of homespun, what do they call those? It's a treadmill desk.
A standing desk.
Yeah,
with
but with a treadmill, yeah. So, you know, hey, that's great. And hopefully it generates electricity to power all those monitors. Unlikely, actually. And it looks like there's a lot of yellow on those monitors too. I wonder if he's using one of those apps that sort of like changes the colors to make sure you don't stay awake.
Flux or however you're supposed to pronounce it.
Yeah, for the Mac platform. But anyway, there we are. There's Tech News Today on a tablet. What are you going to do? Very cool. How do you watch or listen to TNT? Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup and post it on social media of your choice. Just make sure you tag it with How I Watch TNT so we can find it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Tech News Today. Lee Hutchinson, what are you working on these days, and where can people read it?
Oh, well, all of my stuff goes up at arstechnica.com. I just posted a nice sort of nostalgic piece about retro gaming and flight sims in the 90s. So that's a good thing. Pop over there and read it. Very nice. Very nice. Well, thank you so much, Lee, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure to be here. Pleasure's all mine. You can subscribe to Tech News Today at twit.tv/TNT. And if you'd like to help us grow our audience even faster, here's how you can do it. Just post a link to twit.tv/TNT on the social media site of your choice. Tag 3 friends you think might enjoy the show and recommend that they subscribe. You can also watch us live every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC at live.twit.tv. And if you're ever in California's wine country, the real wine country, the one up north, make sure you come in and watch us as part of our studio audience. Send email to tickets@twit.tv. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we're at Tech News Today TV, and you can follow me personally on YouTube. Just find my username, which is Mike Elgan with 1 E in the middle, and subscribe there. Also, don't miss Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific every single weeknight. This show was produced by Jason Cleanthes and edited by Anthony Nielsen. My name is Mike Elgan. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.